So here I am again, about to give the same talk I just spent a half hour giving, and I realized I didn't record it. I thought I had. Oh boy. There's a two-step process. You click on record, and then you have to say, well, are you recording to the cloud or are you recording to the computer? And I guess I forgot to hit recording to the computer, which is, I save it on my hard drive. So here I'm again, about to give the same talk, and I know it's not going to be the same. Oh boy. But anyway, what I wanted to talk about was a dream that I had had last week, I believe it was. It was an interesting dream. So here's the setup. In the dream, I was having a conversation with a cousin of mine, Joe Fortunato. Now, Joe and I have not talked in decades, but we were really close growing up. He was 1 year older than I was, and my grandparents had 3 sons and a daughter, and the 3 sons were older and all tended to have kids at the same time. So we had these family gatherings growing up at my grandparents' house, and all the cousins. There was 13 what we call original cousins, and since then 5 more have been added to the family. But back in those days, there was the 13 original cousins, and we were all really close for the most part in age. But Joe and I were the closest because we were closest in age, and others were closer because their age range were a little bit closer. But anyway, Joe was in my dream, which was kind of a bizarre thing to start with in the first place, just because, well, why Joe? But what the dream was about was a conversation we were having, and he said something to me that has stayed with me, which was, what is it like always? What is it like always? And now I replied back to him with a question. What is it that does not come or go? What is it that does not come or go? Now, my question is a very common non-dual teaching. It's a really strong pointer. What is it that does not come or go? Can be asked in multiple ways. What is it that's prior to language? What is it that's prior to thought? What is it that does not come or go? But I've never heard it phrased the way it was phrased to me in the dream by my dream cousin. What is it like always? What is it like always? Well, what does that mean? What does always mean? Always. No beginning, no end. Infinite, eternal. What is it like always? And maybe because of the semantic nature of that question, it's a different way of phrasing the question, and it brought me kind of stopped me in the dream, and it continues to stop me even as I recite this. What is it like always? There's a level of imprecision, which is why I perhaps asked, well, what is it that does not come or go? I asked it back to him. What is it that does not come or go? The two questions are pointing at the same thing, which is your true nature, my true nature, true nature, not yours or mine. There's no possession here. True nature is true nature. What is it that does not come or go? How is it like always? Well, when does always exist? And here's a critical piece. When does always exist? Now. Is it ever not now? Sure, you could think of the past. I can think about the bicycle ride I was on yesterday with a good friend of mine, having a very interesting discussion, which I might integrate into this video. I did in the first iteration, so hopefully it'll show up again in this one. What is it that does not come or go? What is it like always? When is always? When is always? It's always now, isn't it? Like I was saying, you cannot go into the past. You can think about the past, but when is that thinking occurring? Now. You can't go into the future. You can imagine the future, but when does that imagination of the future happen? Now, doesn't it? It's always now. So what is it like always is not pointing you to the past or the future. It's pointing you to now. What is it like now? What is it like always? What is always? It's always now, isn't it? And what is this now? What does this now consist of? At its broadest level, what this now consists of is just this. Just this. Just this. But it's also pointing to what you and I are. We are just this. We are the now. We are presence. We are always. And when I say we, I don't mean this form. This is transient. This is impermanent. This thing's gonna die and go back into the planet, as is yours. See, Buddhism teaches that everything's impermanent. Everything rises and falls away. Everything. Sometimes really, really quickly, sometimes over millions of years, like a mountain range. Your thoughts come and go. Thoughts arise, thoughts fall away. Feelings come and go. Perceptions come and go. Excuse me 1 second. I got to check the time. Okay, I have a meeting in a half hour. Don't want to be caught talking through this video and miss my meeting. Meetings come and go. Time. Perception of time comes and goes. We tend to perceive ourselves moving through linear time. That's just a perception. If I was a mathematician, I'd have put an equal sign. Always equals now equals just this equals what you are. What's arising right now is what you are. Just this. Other ways of asking the question. What is prior to thought? What is prior to language? What is prior to perception? What is even prior to awareness? I mean, this conscious awareness. Just this. And what is that? I say you, me. What is it like always? Really investigate that. What is it like always? What is prior to thought? What does not come or go. What are you? All pointing to the same thing. What is it like always? It's a very interesting phrasing. What is it like always? What is it like always? What does not come and go? Now. Now does not come and go. And what is that? It's you. Just this. In a previous video that I put together called Mental Distancing Part 1, I actually talk about how one of the first things we need to do to mentally distance ourselves is to mentally distance ourselves from our thoughts, because this is where we get in trouble. We have these thoughts. Say the first thought is the thought of I am. After that thought comes all the other thoughts. I am so-and-so. And I play these roles, and I do this, and I believe this, and I have opinions, and I like this, and I don't like this, and blah, blah, blah. We we add these layers like an onion. We add these layers until we've got this mess of conditioning. And it all goes back to our thoughts. They're just thoughts. And so the first way to really see beyond the thoughts and see that you are not the thoughts is to mentally distance yourself from those thoughts. Create separation. If you observe the thoughts, then you can't be the thoughts, can you? I observe a tree out there. Well, then I'm not the tree, am I? Now, this is step one. I mean, technically, even that's not correct. But step one is create the distance, become aware of the thought, of the feeling, of the perception. Ultimately, when you really investigate this, ultimately, what's recognized is that the thoughts, the feelings, the perceptions appear to be arising in this infinite, boundless, let's call it open, spacious awareness. This now. And this now includes all of that. It's not separate from that. Which is why when I say you are not your thoughts, that's not technically correct. What you are includes those thoughts, but what you are is far greater than your thoughts. Your thoughts are just limited mental snippets. It's part of your mental functioning, your mind functioning. But they arise now. Well, what is this now? Can you find a beginning to now? Can you find a beginning to always? Can you find an end to now? Can you find an end to always? Is there an up or down to now? Is there a left and right to now? Is there a before or behind to now? In front of, behind of, to now, to always? Is there? It's always now. What is this now is what's arising now. And what's arising now? Perceptions and awareness. I had a conversation with a Zen teacher in a Korean lineage, although he's not Korean, but he actually is a fellow that grew up just a couple miles from where I grew up on Long Island, a couple years older than I am, and he visits here in Boise and gives talks on a regular basis pre-COVID-19, and he and I hit it off, partly because maybe we grew up in the same culture in a very similar way, and we hit it off, and we've become kind of good spiritual buddies. We don't hang out or talk much, but when he comes to town, we spend a little time together, and we're having a conversation, face-to-face conversation, and I talked about everything's awareness, and he stopped, and he's like, well, what do you mean by that? And we were having a conversation, and he said, oh, yeah, you mean, yeah. He goes, yeah, everything's perception. And that's kind of stopped me. And so we continued to talk, and what we ended up realizing is that what he was using the word perception, and I was using the word awareness, and on the surface, it seems very dualistic. Awareness, in order to have awareness, to perceive something. But the reverse is true. In order to perceive something, you have to have awareness. You cannot separate awareness from the perception. And so ultimately, there's a coming together, mind to mind coming together of perception is awareness. We might perceive them as being two different things, but they are none other than the same. They kind of co-arise. Perception and awareness co-arise. And now we're talking about this, like this conscious awareness. You know, I look out the window, I say, there's a tree. I label it as a tree, but there's a perception. There's perception of color and edges and shadows and light. And we create a world of objects out of those edges and light patterns, out of the sensations that reach our eye or the frequencies that reach our ear. But awareness and perception are the same thing. And where do they arise? Now. What is it like now? What is it like always? Always. What is it that does not come or go? What is this always? Always, 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 always. It's infinite. It's eternal, boundless, no edges. This always is this now. And what is this now? Just this. What are you? Just this. It's a really good point of investigation. There's a listening component to this. Back to the conversation I had with my friend Dominic yesterday on our bike ride. He's always providing words in Pali, P-A-L-I, the Pali, from the Pali canon of Buddhism. And he resonates with the Thai forest tradition of Buddhism. And he talks about Vitakka Vichara. Vitakka Vichara. And Vitakka is a direction of attention, if I get that right. And the Vichara is more of an evaluation, but not a cognitive evaluation. And actually, as we were having our discussion, as we typically do on our long bike rides, we realized we came up with a word that we both agreed with, which is listening. Vichara is listening, not listening with the ear, but it's a whole body mind listening. It's a turning your attention away from the senses. And it's just a listening. It's listening itself. There's no listener. There's nothing to listen to. There's just listening. There's just what is. What's arising? What's falling away? What is it that's prior to the arising and falling away? What's prior to that? How is it like always? What is prior to the arising and falling away? What does not come or go? What is prior to language? What is prior to thought? How is it like always? Take your pick. What are you? All pointing to the same thing. How is it like always? What is it like always? When is always? Always is now. When is now? Now is always. Hasn't it always been now? Can it ever not be now? I think I'm at the end of this. Was not quite the same as the first time I went through, but it'll have to do. So it was a very interesting dream. I'm glad I had it. Why it was my cousin Joe, I have no idea. But here's the phrase one last time. What is it like always? Really investigate that.